Hi, my name is Claire Schmalzried. I'm doing the boudoir from the Hotel de Crillion for my interiors project. You can see I've inserted a picture here. This is the main picture on the Met website. I just wanted to give like a brief overview of like why I chose it. I'm really a big fan of the Rococo style. I really like all of the really like the colors like blue, gold, white. I really like the lightness and the delicacy of it, especially like in the furniture. You can see the very light legs. The how the room is very coordinated and I also like the idea of analyzing a private space versus like an entertaining space, like a dining room or a ballroom. I think it speaks to a certain level of opulence that the society values, and one could say the French are very opulent. So yeah, and doing an interior private space made me think a lot about in like impressionist work, and like Degas' ballerinas, and the idea of observing something private is observing something beautiful. And so yeah, so let's just get going. So for my first slide, I want to do like an overview that you would like usually see on the Met website. And so the style is it's a Rococo interior with a neoclassical exterior. It's found in Paris, France. Basically the only material to the room that's still original is the oak painted that's gilded. But it's true to its interior because there was a inventory done in the room when the first owner passed away. So basically, the designer that you're seeing, well, it was in charge of this, Pierre-Andre Paris. It was commissioned by the fifth Duc d'Aumont, and then it was then later sold to the Francois Fouly. I'm really bad with French names. You can read the slide, but he bought it 6 years later, and then he passed it on to his descendants, and that's why it is called the Hotel de Crillion, because he owned it probably the longest. It was a private residence within a larger apartment kind of private residence, and it is now like an actual apartment in Paris. You can stay there. It's very cool. And it's been restored and stuff like that. So it's 18th century. Basically, it was purchased in 1788 by its primary owner, and it was acquired by the Met in 1944. So this is the exterior of the building. Basically, kind of how it worked was this was a new neighborhood in France that was being developed, and an architect, Tirode, he developed these exteriors and didn't really build out the buildings interiorly behind them. And there's two pairs, there's one left, one on the right. The one on the left is the one we're looking at right here, which is where the room was. And so basically, he built this, and then the the architect was Jacques Henri Gabriel. They were completed in 1772, and they were auctioned to architects and spectators. So this one around here was divided into four private residences, and the apartment was purchased and built out. Basically, it bears the hallmarks of neoclassical design in the like Corinthian columns. You see the symmetry repeated, the emphasis on geometry, a lot of like long rectangles, tall rectangles, and you see like some Greek figures right here and right here, and then you have these Roman arches that repeat along the bottom of the building. I think it's a really cool building. It's stone, it's white, it looks very classically neoclassical. Okay, and so this is the designer. He was hired by the guy who leased the apartment. Basically, he had just returned from a 3-year stint in Rome where he was studying like archaeology and stuff like that. He is a student of art, archaeology, and antiquities. In addition to being a designer, he's a jack of all trades. And he was studying a lot of the ruins in Pompeii, which had been recently just discovered. And then you can read the slide, Pastium and Herculaneum, and among other sites. We know that because I found a source. You can see a lot of his drawings from these places, which eventually they're on display at like his local, like where he's from, his library. Basically, he designed the room, and then he had a very good career. Louis the 15th or the 16th appointed him to a very high position for like the state, and he worked on large scale projects. He went back to Italy and worked on some other things, and then he died in 1819. So basically, coming back to the room, I wanted to point out that Paris is a very unique designer for this. Actually, let me go back. The room measures 9 feet by 15 feet by about 14 feet. It includes arabesque painted walls, painted gilded oak panelings set with 4 large mirrors reflecting the room around it and moving the light from the window and the chandelier around the room. Originally, this room would have had a balcony out this window that would have looked out over the street. Mostly everything besides the beautiful gold paneling on the doors, the room furnishing is period but not original. In the 6-year period following like the gap between the original owner and then the Crillon's owner, a lot of the stuff was auctioned. Basically, according to the 1782 inventory drawn up after the Duke's death, the boudoir was furnished with 4 stools, 2 armchairs, an ottoman, a comfortable sofa described as having 3 backs, All the seat furniture is upholstered in blue moiré silk and the same color as the curtains. Currently, the Met uses this room to display a portion of a set of furniture from chairmaker Jean-Baptiste Sienne, which was commissioned by Marie Antoinette. While it is period, it's not original. Basically, it houses a daybed and then a bergère chair, which you're seeing in this photo, a mechanical desk, which is seen in this photo. And then basically it also includes on the top of the image a 9-branch chandelier, which would have been like lighting and how it would have been very kind of dim originally. So then I would like to focus on, like I'm still on the same slide, but I will switch to the next slide in a second, is the one true piece of the room that is still original. Basically, with the woman who gifted it to the Met, she had this room taken from France to New York, and she basically disassembled the walls of the room. So the walls are still original. And so I want to focus on those. And so basically, and I want to go back to the Paris is a very unique designer. And so you see here on the left, a very similar image to what you're seeing on the right, where like in the wall, in the painted the wall panels, like even though they're all, there's a close up in a second, but you can see they're very, very similar. The one on the left is from Raphael in his workshop in 1519 in Rome. They did the Palace Loggia. It's very like famous. And so it's very famous for this design element called grotesques. And they're basically these very weightless floral and scrollwork designs that kind of are just a pattern filler for where like big things couldn't go. But then, you know, people got really into them. And so then they made them more detailed by including like mythical creatures and like small animals and like these very whimsical design elements. And so like right here, you can see a close-up of the picture on the left, and you can see the animals that are very, very similar to what Paris used in his designs. Because Paris made a unique designer, because a lot of the time in the Rococo, the aristocracy was moving back to Paris. They were trying to like leave behind the intensity of Versailles, and a lot of things Versailles was very classical. And so taking inspiration from the classical world in Rome, you know, people were trying to move away from that in a certain way, but then do it in a very simpler, lighter, more feminine way. And I think he did that here. He had to be very strategic on how he used his inspiration to make it modern and make it current. And so you see here, like these flowers here look really similar to this. The colors he chose for this medallion really look very similar to this. And you have these rats, and you have these like pointed nose mammal things. I think they're called shrews. You have squirrels up here. And you have like the snails that are right here, and you have more like rat things over here. And so it's very light, very weightless. And something that's new that he did is that hallmarks these French grotesques, because you know, with the discovery of Pompeii, all this stuff was coming back up again. It was having its own renaissance, which Raphael would have experienced too during his time period. So it's just like two renaissances, just, you know, across different time. And so it's just like, you could also see in more panel of the room, there are snakes surrounding like caduceus and stuff like that. But this was been disseminated through like intaglio printmaking found in books, like the interior designers would have used. And so the feminine took it and they made like more feminine, like with these ribbons and these like really delicate florals, and then these like pearls, which are very, very beautiful. Okay, and so in regards to like the Met, my room, I was very grateful. It was a gift of Susan D. Bliss in 1944. It's been restored twice, once in 1977 and one in 1954, right when the room went on display. And it's actually part of the movie that we're going to watch for extra credit. So I'm like really excited to see like what they do with my room. So the main exhibition is Dangerous Liaisons, which was fashion and furniture in the 18th century. There's an exhibition as well as a related publication. And basically the interiors department worked closely with the fashion and costume department to create this like overall evoking statement about what Rococo and 18th century French society was like, which I'll touch on in the next slide. Like I said, the Reitman's Gallery for French Decorative Arts. The other two, the first and the third, just are kind of like about rooms and about the interior and analysis of them. But then Dangerous Liaisons is making more of an overall statement about French culture. So basically, after I want to make a statement about like how after the death of King Louis XIV, the aristocracy came back to Paris for a fresh break from the intensity of Versailles. And this marked a huge shift in the preoccupations of society. They were wanting a more like metropolitan existence where with each other and like the outside world. This value is as the collection of the Met lies in a deeper understanding of the Rococo period as a whole. Rococo art on its surface is filled with frills, light, swirling lines, placid images of leisure, but for the educated viewer, most scenes and images have a sexual undertone that center on the activities of the bedroom, like such as the image you showed on that PowerPoint where you like revealing the ankles and like the woman, I'm thinking of the woman particularly on the swing, which is very famous for Coco painting, and how a lot of it is about liberated sexual behavior, and it's centered on the idea of the bedroom and the idea of like that if you're being very free sexually, moments of privacy sexually are also very valued. And so it would have been a lot of the ideas, like the activities that went on here were very important to Rococo society. And then these are my sources, and kind of how I wanted to wrap it up was a statement